This is a variant that I've just changed a little bit and taken away some of the names, but this is an actual consulting job that I did, wherein there was a lot of functions actually in this one, which helped to really expedite and speed up the way that I did things. But the one thing that I want to show you now is a practical example, basically to kind of show you some of the reality of what you can do with these things. So the first thing I want to show you that I did is I made a shortcut in able to figure out exactly where the employee section stopped and the subtotals of this tallies section began, right? So obviously I changed some of the colors. This is a little bit tough to look at, honestly. It was a lot cleaner, but essentially the thing is, I decided, listen, if I can find a cell in column B that says number sign space mornings, then I will have found the beginning of the subtotal section. So all I have to do is take whatever that row number is, 27 in this case, and subtract 1 to get the number 26, and that would be the last row for all the employees, or also known as, this would be the first row for the mornings or for the subtotals. So I created a quick function that would immediately and quickly tally exactly which row number would be this mornings row. And I named it get mornings row because then I could go and I could say, well, that minus 1 equals 26, and that would immediately tell me where the last employee is on row 26. So if I was looping through the employees through every day of the month, I would just loop from row 5, which never changed. It was always 5 at the beginning, all the way to whatever that number I just decided, in this case 26 would be. So 4x equals 5 to 26, and then of course next x at the very end. So that was one way that I did, is I had that function equal get mornings row. And so let's work on getting that, and in the next lecture we'll talk about another one. If we have time, we'll go over, maybe determining whether each of these days of the month was a weekend. That's a very easy function to make. Is weekend or is weekday to create. So there's just so much you can do with functions. Let's go ahead and recreate that instance where I had this shortcut, this cheat sheet function where I wanted to get the mornings row. By the way, if I took that minus 1 and then that number, I think minus 5 or minus 4 or something, I could also use that in another function called get number of employees, because I could easily take that number or whatever the mornings row is, minus 1, minus 4, or something like this, and I could determine exactly how many employees there were. So I could build upon that and very quickly and very easily have a lot of information just by running that function that I created for myself. It's like a helper thing. So let's go ahead and recreate that exercise really quick, and we're going to call it the same thing that I called it. We're going to call it get mornings row, because we know what that's going to mean for us. So I don't have to necessarily put any parameters. I happen to know exactly what sheet that is. In fact, let's rename this sheet. We'll just call it EMPS for employees. Alt F11. And now we can dig in a little bit deeper into our function here. So get mornings row. I don't think I need any parameters. It's automatically going to be looking at the sheet called EMPS. So in fact, let's make it even simpler on ourselves. Rather than referring to this thing as sheet 7, because sheet 7 is the code name, and then the actual name is EMPS. Let's just name the code name EMPS and hit enter. And what that'll do is, now instead of referring to the sheet by the sheet name of sheet 7, I can just type EMPS dot, and then it knows exactly what worksheet I'm referring to. So that even if I change this name from EMPS to some other gibberish here, as long as the code name, the underlying code name for this is still EMPS, then I can still type EMPS dot, and it still is referring to this sheet. Regardless of the sheet name, the code name remains EMPS. Okay, that is my rant about code names for the moment. So let's go ahead and go through this. So we're going to do a for next loop. In order to get to that, we need to stop once we find the number signed space mornings cell. So what we're going to do is we're going to say for x equals, and we could get the last row in column B. I'm not going to. I knew for a fact that this fellow was never going to have more than 300 or 400 employees. He was dealing with like 20 or 40 employees. So let's say for x is going to be equal to, we always know we start with 5, right? This is always the first employees on row 5. So x equals 5 to, let's say, 300. Okay, and then we're going to say next x. That creates our for next loop. You'll find out more about that if you have any of my other courses, like the Ultimate Excel Programmer course. We're not going to dig in deep, but you do have the code. You can copy and paste, or you can actually just watch this a couple times if it doesn't make sense. We'll go through the basics of it, though. So 5 is going to be, x is going to be 5 to 300. And then we're going to refer to emps.cells. And what row do we want? You got it. We want the row X, which will change each time we loop. And what column do we want? You got it. We want column B, and we could put that in quotes, or we could just use the numeral 2 for column 2. So here's what we're going to do with that cell. We're going to compare it. We're going to say if this cell on that row, but in column 2, if this particular cell says number sign mornings, which is what we want, then, and I'm going to type end if, and I think I hit an extra space there. Okay, so we have our little tab thing going on here. So let's go ahead and just run through this really quick. If I hit F8, so X is going to start at 5, and it's going to say if the current row of X, which is current row 5, column 2 says employee 1. That certainly does not say hashtag space mornings, so that's not it. And then the next X is row 6. That's employee 2, employee 3, employee 4. Let's just go ahead and put a stop marker right there. Let's put the word stop right here so that if I hit F5, it'll actually zoom all the way until this is true. So it's true on row 27. X is 27, and that's what we need to return, right? So we found it already. So we're going to say get mornings row equals, what are we going to say it equals? Exactly. Whatever X is, that's the row that we want to return. Now, the thing is, we don't want this macro to keep going all the way up to 300 and looping forever and ever and ever. What do we want to do? We want to tell it, hey, we found the solution. Let's go ahead and exit the function. We don't need to keep running all the way to 300. We found it already on row 27. We're good to go. Let's exit the function. We've already given this answer to the function. So now get mornings row has returned 27 and exit the function. So if we see that in practice, so we do a sub, we'll just call it testy123. We're going to say my var is going to be equal to get mornings row, and it should actually capitalize that for me. And sure enough, it did. That tells me that is a valid name of a function or a sub. Anyway, let's go ahead and run it. I'm just going to hit Shift F8 because I don't want to watch it go through this. We just did that. But I do want to see, oh, looky there. Get mornings row equals 27. So we've just immediately created a function that can run at super, super fast speeds, but it'll return to me the number, the row where basically the subtotals begin on row 27. Now, if I have some more employees, so if I right click and insert, and we have employee X and Y and Z and whatever, I'm just gibberishing here. But anyway, now the formula should return the row of 30 now. So it'll return a different formula whenever we run it again. In fact, we're still in motion here. If I hit Shift F8, now we see that the get mornings row returns the value of 30 for me. So this function is dynamic. It's always going to do the right thing for me because we designed it right. Now, furthermore, we can use that function within a function. So if I tell it that I would like to create a function, pretty please, that tells me the number of employees. So I'm going to say get number of employees, or EMPS if you want to, And I don't really need any parameters for this one either, because believe it or not, if it's always going to be on the sheet called EMPS, and we're going to start with the knowledge that we already know that the very starting row is always 5. So that's good to know. And we can always use this get mornings row function that we just created. So we're going to say mornings row is equal to whatever that function gives us. So we'll know that part. And then all we have to do to get the number of employees in a moment. In fact, let's go ahead and run this. Let's hit F8 and let's do Shift F8 so we don't have to, oops, I think I accidentally pressed the Enter key. I think I did. So if we go here, oops, let's hit F8, F8. Let me hit Shift F8. There we go, that's more like it. So this gives us the number 30, and based on the number 30, we know that we can get the we can get anything from here. We can get the last employee row. The last employee row is actually this -1. So if we didn't want the mornings row necessarily, but we wanted the last employee row, we could just take this function and whatever it returns -1, and that would work too. So that'll return 29 instead of 30. So Shift F8. So the last emp row equals 29. That's good. And then we want to take 29 minus either 4 or 5. I hate this kind of math, but I'm embarrassed. But let's go ahead and just try that. I think it's -4 actually, if we're starting on row 5. Let's see. So we're going to say get number of EMPS, which is the result of this formula. I believe that's going to be the last EMP row, which is 29 right now, -4. And we'll verify that in just a second. So let's hit F8, 25. Let's actually verify that. Let's hover our mouse over all the employees here. And over here in the lower right, yes, the count of cells that I have hovered over is 25. So it looks like my math was good. So all we would have to do to get the number of employees now, so we're using this function to get us the last employee row, essentially. And then we're taking that a step further by subtracting 4 from it. And then we have another function that we can cheat. This is so much fun. So we're going to say sub num of EMPS. So let's try this one out. We'll do a message box this time, MSG box space, and we'll use our new function within a function, get number of EMPS, with no parameters, and it just works. So if I hit F8, actually I'm going to hit Shift F8, or I could just hit F5. So if we just run it, it runs and finds us the answer based on this formula and this function running through. All right, so I hope that that is giving you a really good demonstration of how you can use functions, and you can actually put a function within a function if you need to. I do it all the time. Every single time you can save a whole bunch of steps and save yourself from copying all this code. You don't want to copy this code on this macro and then the next macro. Well, heck, I need the mornings row again, so I'll just copy and paste this big paragraph here and paste it here. No, turn it into a function where you can just return the value, the answer to that function back. But look how much neater this one line of code is than if you had to copy and paste this. And what's worse is if you have to copy and paste this get mornings, essentially this paragraph that has the formula to getting the row that you want. Well, what if you have to make a change? Well, then you have to make that change 30 or 40 places where you copied and pasted that information. So that's why we turn it into a function that dynamically can be dispersed throughout your code, and it'll return you the answer. And if you make a tweak to it, it will work everywhere that function has been populated by you. So that is much more efficient and much more dynamic, so that you can just go back to your function and make your little tweaks and make it better and better, add some more optional parameters that allow it to go a little bit different direction whenever you need it to. And all the other ones that are already existing, they don't care if you have an optional parameter you just added today, because it's optional and they'll still work. But the new features you're adding will now work better for the new times you're using it. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please hit us up on the forum. We'll be happy to help you. We're here for your success. We'll see you in the next lecture.